Good evening. My name is Brian D'Amico, and I'm the Manager of Educational Services here at VectorVest. It is my pleasure to present your strategy of the week this evening for Friday, the 20th of September, 2013, titled The Best Performing Searches, Past and Present. Here at VectorVest, we have four classifications of investors. We've got prudent, aggressive, conservative, and speculative. These classifications are described in detail in Chapter 11 of the green book you received with your trial package. That book is titled Stocks, Strategies, and Common Sense. In addition to that book, we also provide a special report called the Strategic Investment Matrix, and it's built right into VectorVest for you. To access this report, just click on the Views tab at the top and come over to the Special Report section, and you can see it right down at the bottom of the list. Tonight, we're going to look at the best performing searches that range from aggressive to those that are more prudent to conservative. As we discussed in the timing video tonight, we are cautiously bullish on the market right now. So if you're thinking about entering the market, tonight we'll look at a few searches you should consider. Even if you don't use these searches, you can use the technique we'll discuss tonight in the future, anytime you wish to find the top performing searches for yourself. Let's move right into VectorVest and do a quick recap of where we are in the market right now. Here we're looking at the market timing graph over the last year, and I've added support and resistance lines to the graph. Currently you can see that we're right at this resistance level, which is one reason to be cautious about entering the market. Additionally, we're seeing a bearish divergence between price and our market timing indicators. And let's take a look at that. If I remove support and resistance, and let's move down to about 3 months. If I add relative timing, you can see here, as price has been rising, we saw a relative timing drop. If I put buy to sell ratio on, you can see that's been dropping as well. And the MTI, that too has been dropping, which has been telling us that downside risk outweighs upside potential. However, as long as the trend is up, we need to play it that way. Just know that you should be cautious about entering the market and do so only if the market is rising. That being said, I wanted to do some work for you and give you the top performing searches. While getting ready for this, I made an observation about the recent market's uptrend. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to remove the MTI here. Now let's go back to 1 year. Take a look at the shift in this uptrend here. Here you can see we had a blast off phase in the market. And look at this, basically straight up. The blast off phase of the market is usually where you can make some big gains and make those big gains very quickly. After that blast off phase, notice how the uptrend leveled off somewhat. It wasn't as steep as it was back here. While gains during this trending phase of the market are still made, they're not as easy to come by and don't come as quickly. So I wanted to see which searches perform the best during this blast off phase, during this trending phase, as well as over the last 2 weeks to see which searches are continuing to perform well. What I expected to see was a shift from bottom fishing searches performing well during the blast off phase to more prudent to conservative searches performing best recently. I was actually surprised by what I found. Let me show you. Here's a look at the average annualized rate of return of the VectorVest composite during each time period. And the VectorVest composite is our representation of the overall market. Here you can see that during the blast off phase, which lasted about 1 month, the average annualized rate of return of the market was 153%. Then during the trending phase, which actually lasted 2 months, it dipped all the way down to 27%. And then over the last 2 weeks, that return increased to 49%. I tested every prudent search in our system and averaged them out. Let's look at that to compare. So here you can see the prudent searches on average kept pace with the market during this blast off phase. The average prudent search had an average annualized rate of return of 151% during this blast off phase. Then when the market entered the trending phase, the prudent searches nearly doubled the market performance. It also nearly doubled the market performance over the last 2 weeks. From there, I then tested all the bottom fishing searches in our system. These bottom fishing searches tend to be more for the aggressive investor because they're lower price shares that typically have sell ratings due to being beaten down at the time. Let's look at those to compare. I want you to notice the tremendous performance of these bottom fishing searches during this blast-off phase. An annualized rate of return of 282% during this blast-off phase. Now this was expected. These types of stocks typically really take off during the blast-off phase. What I didn't expect was for the bottom fishing searches to continue to outperform during the trending phase and over the last 2 weeks. Now always keep in mind, with higher return, since they are aggressive stocks, there is more risk associated. So you'll have to weigh the lure of these high returns with a little bit more risk. So the question of all questions is, which are the best searches? Well, let's go back into VectorVest so I can show you how I found them and so you can learn how to do it for yourself going forward. Here we are in the Unisearch tab of VectorVest. And I focused my attention here on the bottom fishing folder as well as the prudent folder. However, you can do the same thing for any group you wish or any of your own searches. All I did was open up the folder and I performed quick tests on all of the searches in both folders during the time periods that we looked at earlier. For example, the first time period started the 25th of June. So I came up here and I moved back to June and selected the 25th as the start date. So I wanted to go from the bottom of the market to when the blast off phase ended. So what I would do is come in here and just run the first search. And then I performed a quick test of the top 10 and set the ending date to the end of the blast off phase, which actually came on the 12th of July. So I ran that test and I got the information right here. So what I did is I took the average annualized rate of return along with the number of winners, the percentage of winners here, and I typed it into a spreadsheet. Let me show you what it looks like. So here's an example of the spreadsheet that I used. So all I would do is I've got it all set up here with all the searches in the bottom fishing folder. Here's the all ordinaries for the annualized rate of return. I'd come in here and see that that was 386.43. So I'd put that here, 386.43. And the percentage of winners, since there was 10 winners out of 10, was 100. And this column here is where I just multiplied the annualized rate of return times the number of winners to kind of get a score for myself on how it did. So then I continued to do that. I would run each search and quick test it during this time period, record the results, and then do the same thing for the other 2 time periods. And it really only took about 5 to 10 minutes to type all that stuff in there. When I was all done, all I did was add up the total score from each of the 3, and that gave me the best overall searches. Let's take a look at the completed results that I've got here. So I'm just going to come down. Let's take a look at the bottom fishing tab here. And you can see I've got it all filled in here. And if you're wondering why this one is blank, it's most likely because no results were found, or maybe only one stock was found. What I also found interesting, here I've got it sorted by the total column. And we can see all ordinaries, bottoms up, S&P and ASX 200. I found it interesting that the best overall searches were also, for the most part, very consistent through each of the time periods that I tested. Take a look. Here we've got these 3 up at the top overall. If I sort it by the last 2 weeks, you can see that bottoms up is also at the top. S&P, ASX 200, all ordinaries is up there. If I sort it by the trending phase, once again, we have bottoms up, all ordinaries. S&P, ASX 200 is now 5th, but still way up there. And during the blast off phase, all ordinaries, bottoms up, and ASX 200 is second. So the searches that did best overall were pretty consistent through each of the stages. So I started to feel more and more confident that they were some of the best searches in there. And the same was true for the prudent folder. Got it sorted by the total column over here. We can see, look at that, top VST vector stocks, top of the list. Then we got prudent turnaround candidates. And if we sort it by each of the other columns, turnaround candidates, number 1, top VST vector stocks, prudent. We can do the same thing for each of the other two. Prudent is number 2, turnaround candidates is number 3. Top VST vector stocks is now 6, but still way up there. And during the blast off phase, top VST vector stocks is number 1, prudent. The only one that slipped a little bit was turnaround candidates, but still had 80% winners and an 133% annualized rate of return. So by doing this exercise, I started to feel very comfortable in which searches not only performed well during the blast off phase, but performed well during all 3 stages of this market uptrend. And by doing this, you can start to feel confident that you found some of the best searches moving forward. So let's take a look at a summary of what we've got here. So if you're looking for the top performing searches, in the bottom fishing folder, which they do tend to be more on the aggressive side, we got all ordinaries, bottoms up AU, S&P/ASX 200. And on the prudent side, we got top VST vector stocks is number 1, the prudent search is number 2, and turnaround candidates is number 3. So in addition to learning what the top searches are, I hope you also learned a technique you can use to find top performing searches going forward. I'd like to thank you all for attending tonight and hope you have a great weekend. Good night, everybody.